Well, what do you say we have an Indiana Outdoor Show? Huh? Sounds like it's been too long, and it sounds like we're ready to go, so let's do this thing. It's called the Indiana Outdoor Show. I am your host, Brian Pointer. Each and every Saturday, we love to bring you what we do here, talking about this weekend, all things in Indiana. Of course, it is the first of what will be many weekends of outdoor activities. The deer season in the state of Indiana open for archery. I did not see many pictures earlier this week because, of course, deer season came in with 91-degree temperatures. I can remember sitting in tree stands on the first week of October that it snowed. I don't ever remember 91 degrees, and I don't know why anybody would want to do that. But I'm sure there were memories made somewhere. I don't know what you would do with that deer once you put it down when it's 91. You better get to work really, really quick. And we're just going to hope for better things to come. This weekend should be fantastic. And hopefully you fill your freezer. And as we like to remind folks, as you get into the woods, once you filled your freezer, Hoosiers Feeding the Hungry is a great organization where you can drop off your field-dressed deer and it can be processed for free. And that protein stays in local communities. You can go to the Hoosiers Feeding the Hungry program. Deb Treesh would love to increase the number of deer that are donated. And again, that's free. Just go to the website and figure out which of the local butchers in your area have capacity to do that. We are going to have a great program today. As I mentioned, all Indiana. Brad Feaster is going to be with us. He used to be the property manager down at 6,000 acres of Goose Pond in the southern part of the state. What a great, just historic conservation recapturing renovation that's changed the flyway in really in the Mississippi Valley and in this area where these birds have changed migration habits, and they're going to have something called the Big Sit. S-I-T, the Big Sit. We're going to let Brad talk all about what that is. I know he's very excited about it. Nick Buja is going to be with us. He's with the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation. New guest here. He's been spending a lot of time in the state of Indiana. We're going to find out what they do and why they are helpful to us as conservation fans. I had an opportunity to meet him with a group of other conservation and groups that got together at the Rendezvous down at Atterbury. So we're going to talk to him. And Captain Jet Quillen with our law enforcement division, of course, I'm sure he's going to be making sure people are safe and understanding what to do this opening weekend. But we're going to find out about some very special trained divers just added to the ranks of our law enforcement division. So let's go. Let's get this thing started. Brad Feaster on hold. It is the Indiana Outdoor Show, and I'm your host. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be back right after this. Oh, what a beautiful weekend. My word. It was miserable during the start of the week, and man, did it end so well. And here we've got just a beautiful weekend. The first full weekend, of course, for Indiana's deer hunting season, which opened earlier this week to 91 degrees. Lovely. Haven't seen too many pictures for obvious reasons, but that will change hopefully this weekend and as we move further into the season. And we have a big show, as I mentioned. It's always great to visit with folks we haven't spent some time with in quite some time, and Brad Feaster is one of those. He is the former property manager at Goose Pond, and Brad, you're now the Wildlife Action Coordinator for the state of Wildlife Action Plan Coordinator for the state. What in the world is that?
Well, we've got a state wildlife action plan. Every state has one. And it involves all of our partners, and involves it's the entire department. It's not just a Division of Fish and Wildlife plan, but basically it's about trying to get our partners and even our own staff coordinating efforts, trying to focus our work in what we call conservation opportunity areas so that we can get our biggest bang for our buck. Instead of a shotgun approach to conservation, this is, trying to really focus in on these high potential, high quality areas.
Well, that is fantastic. Tell me more about that as we move forward. I know that's not what we were intending to talk about today, of course, but that's fascinating to me. How does that work?
Well, it's for me, for the coordinator, it's really about going out and talking to a lot of people, partners, old partners and new partners, trying to create new partnerships, trying to track everybody's efforts, what they're doing. And there's a big in the Wildlife Action Plan. It's not just habitat work or research or that kind of thing. There's also a huge outreach and education component to it, because that was one of the common threats that is prevalent throughout the swamp, is that the need for more education, more outreach. Just so citizens, the general public can feel more connected or understand their connection or their role that they play in conservation.
Wow, that sounds like a pretty daunting task, and I know that all the states have these. How are we doing on our plan compared to others? I'd say we're somewhere in the middle. There are certainly other states that are well ahead of us as far as implementing their plan, and then there are states that aren't as far along as we are, that that don't even have a coordinator. It's somebody else. Somebody's doing two jobs, trying to do their regular job, right,
and then trying to be the swamp coordinator. So yeah, we're about in the middle.
Well,
and it all, it comes down, really, it boils down to money.
Sure.
It
always does, doesn't it?
Right. It always does. Yep.
Well, I know you lived a former life in a very important part of our state, which was as the property manager at a place called Goose Pond, and very generically, because we're going to get to an event that's taking place down there, I'd love for you just to kind of describe very generally what Goose Pond is and what that means to the state of Indiana.
Well, it's a relatively new fish and wildlife area. We purchased it in 2005, and it's mostly it's almost 9,000 acres now. Originally, it was just a little bit around 8,000 acres. It was a big partnership. Natural Resources Conservation Service plays a huge role. Because most of the property is enrolled in Farm Bill program back then it was called the Wetlands Reserve Program. Now it's WRE, and to be honest with you, I'm not sure what WRE stands for, but something easement. Anyway, it's a permanent easement. It's a permanent easement on the property, and so NRCS is a big partner with us, U.S. Department of Agriculture. 5,000 acres of, when everything's full, it's got 5,000 acres of shallow water emergent marsh habitat, and probably another 1,300 acres of grasslands. So it's really unique to Indiana in that it's this really rare habitat type, and it's all pretty much contiguous. And it's just been phenomenal to watch the restoration take place and watch just, the wildlife and the plants as well respond to the restoration.
Well, I know that it is such a significant property that it's actually changed the migration route of many of the migratory species, and that's one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, because there's something taking place here in just a couple weeks on October 13th called the Big Sit, and I know
right.
that's in conjunction with the Friends of Goose Pond, and it's a big deal. It's an international event. So why don't you describe what that is and why that's important?
Well, it's a lot of people describe it as a tailgate party for birders, really. Basically, you sit well, you got a 15-foot circle, and you got a 15-foot circle, and you just sit all day and you count the number of birds you see. Just keep a tally, and people can come and go throughout the day. A lot of times these big sits, people will bring food, and you're hanging out with a bunch of other like-minded people, and you're watching birds and sharing stories. And last year the Friends of Goose Pond hosted one, and I went to it. I wasn't a part of it, and it was really kind of neat. And I thought, this would be something that would be cool to do. Well, Elizabeth Middleton, who is our stewardship coordinator, approached me about a big sit, and I'm like, well, I was thinking about doing it too. So we've sort of teamed up with the Friends, and we're going to put it on. And we're looking forward to it.
Obviously birding is a lot of folks love their birds and do this very faithfully, but describe that again. They're sitting in a 15-foot circle, and there are all these people sitting in circles around.
So you just have a 15-foot circle, and that's the standard. It can be a little bit bigger, but you stay in one place throughout the whole day and just count all the birds that you see. And what's really cool about it. It's really informal. People come and go as they please. You don't have to be an expert birder if you're just curious about birds, or you're a beginning birder. It's a great avenue to hang out with people that really know birds. And you can see, we'll have spotting scopes and binoculars, and it's just really sort of a laid back way to spend a day engaging people, right? Whether they're expert birders or beginning birders.
I'm not one of those guys that could be qualified in any way, shape, or form of a birder unless it's a duck, and then I can tell you what it is. But on October 13th, which is a Sunday, you're going to have this event down at the Goose Pond Fish and Wildlife area, and participants come from all over the place, and you can come and go. As you said, the event is free, but you do have to register. You want people to register for this, of course, I assume.
That is right. You can go to the DNR calendar, and on that calendar, on October 13th, there's a registration. You can register just for the big sit, and you're welcome. People are welcome to bring, if they want to bring food. Last year we brought some wild game. We had some deer and I think some frog legs, and we just hung out.
So don't you scare the birds away by doing that?
No. We're sitting up, we're sitting up right behind the visitor center. So, you got a big, huge view of most of the property, and, birds are flying around, and you just count what's flying.
And what do you do with the information?
It all gets reported back to the national organizers, it's in Connecticut. I think it's like the Connecticut Birding Club or something like that. But all the official big sits all across the world all report back their data, their information for that day. It's just kind of neat.
Are you a birder yourself, or just something you saw and said, hey, this is kind of cool?
I bird a little bit, I grew up hunting and fishing and bird watching, and I still like to do it. So I'm by no means an expert, but I can get by.
Well, you've spent an awful lot of time at Goose Pond, and one of the things that I've seen and heard about over the years is there's species that show up down there that haven't shown up in the state of Indiana ever. And that's kind of a neat opportunity. That's kind of like the mother lode if you're a birder, right?
It is. Yes, it is. And it has exceeded, I think, everyone's expectations. Everyone thought it would be really something special, but nobody expected it to be as special as it is.
Have you ever, what's the rarest or the bird that you are most proud that you've seen down there?
Oh gosh, maybe the hooded crane.
That's a big bird.
Spotted red shank. both are sort of Asian migrants that were really, really lost and somehow ended up at Goose Pond. Roseate spoonbill, that was a pretty cool bird back. So there's, it just goes, there's a big list. Of course, whooping cranes are there throughout most of the winter. Those are really cool to see. But I'd have to say probably the hooded crane or spotted redshank.
Brad Feaster is our guest. He is the Wildlife Action Plan Coordinator for the state. And I guess what I'm hearing from this, Brad, is the Big Sit is just something you want to do, and you're doing it in conjunction with the Friends of Goose Pond and kind of doing it as kind of an interested citizen, someone who has interest in the park and the property and the fish and wildlife area.
Yeah, and it's cool just to hang out with a bunch of people that are, share the same interest, and building those relationships, and just talking about conservation. We may not even talk about birds all day. Who knows what all gets talked about? But it's just a fun day.
Maybe you can solve all the world's problems when you're down there. I think that's the best venue to do it. Would you promise me you'll give it an attempt?
Yeah, we'll give it a 10. We'll give it a try.
What are you doing in the fall this year? What are you looking forward to? You going to be out doing some of your own stuff?
Well, of course, I'll be out deer hunting and duck hunting and all that entails. That's always my favorite part of the year is this time of year. So.
Well, that's good for you. And again, we're going to have to catch up with you more. Is there anything that I haven't asked you about this Wildlife Action Plan that you want people to be aware of? I don't really say that I have a lot of intimacy or familiarity with what you do and how you do it. So I'm glad that you were able to expand that, and maybe there's more that you want to share.
I guess the biggest takeaway is, and what I always try to tell people is, everybody has a role, and the plan itself is really big. I mean, it's like 1,500 pages, and it's just really big plan. But everybody has a role. Everybody is connected, whether they realize it or not. And a little bit of conservation practices, that a little bit of habitat where you live will make a big difference when everybody does it, and you add it all together. That's always the message: is everybody's got a role.
You bet. Brad, it's always great to visit with you. Good luck at the Big Sit. Go to the calendar at DNR, and it's October 13th, and go down to Goose Pond and spend some time and tell Brad hello, and thanks for all he does. Good to talk with you, and we'll look forward to following up.
All right. Thank you, Brian.
My pleasure. It is the Indiana Outdoor Show, and I am your host, Brian Pointer. Don't go anywhere. We're going to get back right after this. It is Indiana Outdoors this weekend. Hopefully you're going somewhere, doing something fun in the great Indiana Outdoors. And we always love to talk about that. And, of course, the fall, no better time to do that in the early fall here, as a lot of folks taking to field and forest maybe for the first time in a long time. And I can understand why, since it's been so dang hot. But better times to come, as you heard me mention at the top of the hour. Nick Bougie is with us this morning, and new guest. He is the Midwestern States Manager for the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation. Nick, it's great to have you be a part of Indiana Outdoors. How have you been?
Good. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Well, my pleasure. You and I met at an event down at Atterbury, where there was a rendezvous of sorts, where a lot of different conservation and advocacy groups got together, and it was hosted in part by the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation. And maybe we'll just kind of start with, what is that? What do you guys do? I know you've spent a lot of time here in Indiana.
Yeah, so we're a bipartisan organization. We work with, there's a congressional caucus, a governor's caucus, and then we have a state caucuses in 49 states. So we work to protect and advance hunting, angling, recreational shooting, and trapping, and just kind of promote scientific-based conservation practices, the North American model of wildlife conservation, and the American system of conservation funding.
So your role is pretty small.
Yeah.
Well, Nick, you even though the title says Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, you're very much from the top to the bottom. It sounds like it's not just something that's based out of Washington, D.C.
Yeah, no, I'm actually based out of Michigan. I cover 7 states in the upper Midwest. I have Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, North and South Dakota, and Wisconsin. So I don't do too much at the federal level. I mostly work with state legislators and governors in those states. So we've got other people in D.C. that work with Congress, and when they overlap with things like the Farm Bill, we get involved. But mostly I'm just focused on what's happening in the states.
Well, we can certainly use that, and obviously your advocacy and organizing of different organizations here recently in Indiana at this rendezvous, which was hosted at Atterbury, brought a lot of different groups from the deer hunters and the ducks and the turkeys and all sorts of other groups together, maybe for the first time, interdepartmental communication. Why is that important? What have you found the benefits of that have been?
Yeah, one of our goals as an organization is kind of provide those opportunities for legislators, but also conservation groups and fish and wildlife agencies. We want to provide opportunities to build strong relationships for all those groups, so we can be proactive when there's issues that arise. There's communication between the groups, and it's not something where we're on the defense, or maybe one group has an issue but they don't feel comfortable talking with the DNR about it because they don't have that relationship. So really just building stronger relationships. We feel that results in better results for sportsmen and women.
So let's talk about Indiana just for a second here. And I know that even this last week you were here in Indianapolis and doing some of your advocacy work. Give me some ideas of what Hoosiers might recognize that you've been involved in, or some of the initiatives that you're working through.
Yeah, so this has been my first year covering Indiana, so I've really just been trying to get to know everybody, and but what we've been working on is a lot of forest management issues, making sure that the DNR and the Division of Forestry kind of have the tools that they need to properly manage forests. And I think there's a misconception out there when we talk about managing forests. It's just about lumber or lumber sales, and that's really not the case. Properly managed forest results in healthy habitats and good water quality for sportsmen and women. That kind of brings me to the second thing we've been working on. Was we supported the listing of the rough grouse as a state endangered species. I know that we kind of have hunters and anglers kind of have a mixed relationship when it comes to the endangered species list for a variety of reasons, but we really felt that in order to protect the rough grouse and hopefully be able to hunt it in the future, that was something that needed to happen. We've been working with all the Great Lakes states on preventing the spread of Asian carp. And then moving into next year, we kind of see a lot of the same issues arising, and we want to focus a little bit more on making sure anglers have access to the Lake Michigan waterfront and Geist Reservoir.
Boy, I tell you what, there's an awful lot that you just said there, because we've talked recently here on Indiana Outdoors about the listing, the proposed listing of the rough grouse. And as you mentioned, it's just so tied to many other things, most of which is its habitat and forestry, which is what I know you said you just were working through, and good forestry practices. But give me your thoughts on what people need to be aware of when it comes to this, in particular to the rough grouse.
Yeah, I would say specifically for rough grouse, a lot of the decline since the 1960s can really be tied into a lack of young forests, and that's not. I don't want to say no one's necessarily to blame for that. There's a lack of young forests across the country. Forests are kind of moving up and up in age class. And we're just kind of now realizing the effects it's having on things like rough grouse and woodcock, but songbirds and amphibians and all sorts of non-game species. And we're just kind of, I think the folks at the DNR know what need to do and know what they should be doing. They want to do it. It's just making sure they have the ability to do that, making sure their hands aren't tied and that we're following the best scientific management practices when it comes to wildlife and forestry.
Well, it's great to have you be a part of the Indiana Outdoors show, and we certainly appreciate all the work that goes into that. How are we doing in comparison with our neighboring states that you see and deal with?
For the most part, pretty good. You guys have a very your legislature is very, very active. Your DNR is great to work with. A lot of support from the conservation groups. So I see Indiana kind of being able to take it to the next level and over the next few years and really just be a great spot for outdoor recreation and sportsmen and women and kind of a leader across the nation when it comes to wildlife policy.
Well, let's make sure, Nick, that you and the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation is a regular part of Indiana Outdoors going forward. Is that fair?
Yeah, I'd appreciate that.
No problem. It's great to visit with you this weekend. Go out and do something fun. Enjoy this nicer, cooler weather, and we'll look forward to having you back here real soon.
All right, thanks. Have a great day.
You too. It is the Indiana Outdoor Show, and I am your host, Brian Pointer. We're going to go visit with our good friends in the Law Enforcement Division. Jet Quillen joins us. When we return, it's the Indiana Outdoor Show. Back right after this. Having too much fun. It is the Indiana Outdoor Show, just having way too much fun. Many thanks to Nick Buja, who is with the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, as well as Brad Feaster, former property manager of the famous Goose Pond down in southern part of the state. What an unbelievable place. They're getting ready to have a big old bird watching event, but it's also the first weekend of Indiana's archery deer season. And conservation officers always out and doing their great job. But with me is Jet Quillen. It's great to have you be here with us again on Indiana Outdoors. I know this is a very, very busy time for you, Captain. But best to you and all the conservation officers and law enforcement out there this week.
Well, thank you very much. It's an exciting time of year for us.
Indeed it is. And speaking of, I read recently, and I always love to make sure people understand the very diverse nature of what our law enforcement division does, not just on opening weekend of some of these great seasons that we have, and they're out there 365 days a year, but very recently I saw that Indiana added quite a few new public safety divers to their trained ranks. What does that mean?
Well, we have with these new 6 divers that we're adding to our team, we'll have 47 public safety divers for the state of Indiana. And what that is, it's a specially trained type of diver. It's most divers that you see on TV that go down to the Caribbean in the beautiful blue water and dive, they're recreational divers. Our public safety divers, it's a little more intense training. You cover a broader range of diving conditions, diving dangers. You actually get into the science of diving and you learn in depth about the type of injuries you can actually succumb to if you're not careful and not following the right guidelines. So it's a pretty intense, in-depth training that our officers go through, and it's just another way that we can serve our citizens of Indiana.
Well, I tell you what, I don't know any public safety diver that would call that recreation, because you're oftentimes, and these divers, thank God, are there, but they have some pretty horrific things to have to deal with, and they are truly some of Indiana's best. And unfortunately, this summer, they were called into action too many times.
Yeah, we had unfortunately a busy summer. It's starting to slow down, which is what we were hoping for. But our officers and divers are always there to answer that call when it comes in, and we are really appreciative of these 6 divers that made the commitment to go to dive school. It's a 6-week commitment, so that's 6 weeks. Not only they're in training hard and putting their bodies to the test and their minds to the test, but they're also 6 weeks away from their families. So we really appreciate that sacrifice that they make, and it's a really honorable decision they made.
It sure is. And, there's so many different situations, as you just said. I know there's specialists in fast-moving water and, of course, cold temperatures when people fall through the ice. Just pretty, they're bad dudes. And women, they know what they're doing, and they're trained well, but they're some of the best of the best.
Yeah, they go through a lot. They are tested, multiple times throughout the school, mentally and physically, and that's why a quarter of our officers are divers. That's why not all of our officers are divers. It's not for everybody, and we realize that. That's why we're so thankful for the ones that step up and are willing to make that choice.
So is it safe to say that some of these folks maybe didn't know anything about diving and they just said this is a calling they felt, or did they have some experience before?
Yeah, no, a majority of our divers that they come into it have never dove before. They might have went snorkeling on vacation or something like that, but most of it's brand new. So that's why we start from the ground up. The first couple days is we don't even get in the water. It's strictly classroom. Then we might get them in for some swimming and some snorkeling, and then we slowly go into wetsuits and regulators in your mouth, and eventually we transition to full face masks, dry suits that fully encapsulate your body. We start going to open water, transition from the pool to open water, and then we start going deeper and deeper and having them complete casts underwater. So it's all trying to build that from the ground up, building their comfort level, and then eventually they'll be doing mock scenarios, body recovery, vehicle recovery. How do we get a truck out of the water that's 100 feet offshore? So they have to troubleshoot that and figure it out, and we have the equipment for them and the training for them, and they go through it, and eventually they'll knock it out of the park.
Captain Jack Quillen is with us. He is with our Division of Law Enforcement, and I mentioned at the beginning here, it's traditionally a big weekend for a lot of folks who may be getting into field or forest for the first time in a while, but I know you probably have a message for everybody.
Yeah. We have the best job in the world, obviously, but we transition from summer to fall, and we know that that's deer season time. And this past Wednesday, archery season came in, and cooler temperatures this weekend. We're expecting a lot of our Hoosiers out in the field, and we just urge everybody, be safe. If you're going to be in a tree stand, wear your full body harness. Identify your target before you're releasing those arrows, and just overall take your time, be safe, and enjoy yourselves.
Well, we couldn't have ended any better with that. Safety is always paramount, and people have heard me over these 20 years of Indiana Outdoors. No conservation officer, no law enforcement officer out there is trying to steal anybody's fun pie, but being safe and making sure that you follow the rules is certainly important for everybody. And
absolutely,
you guys and gals that do that, do it in such a way that very dangerous situations, especially when there's guns and other things involved. So we wish you the best. Are you going to get out and do anything yourself?
Well, I hope so. We'll see. It seems like work always comes first.
Shocking.
But hopefully we'll see.
Well, that is great news. And as always, thank you to the men and women that wear the green uniform, and we look forward to talking to you and hopefully have a safe hunting season this fall, and always an open phone here for you. And thanks for your contributions.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. It is Indiana Outdoors. I am your host, Brian Pointer. What a great show we've had. It's not over yet. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be back and wrap it up right after this. Where does the time go? Where does it go? My gosh, Indiana Outdoors this weekend. Many thanks to all of our affiliates that carry Indiana Outdoors for these 20-plus years. If you're new, we hope you're here for another 20 years. If you like the show, call the stations. They do have a choice. Make sure that they know that we appreciate it. All of these shows are put into our audio vault right after they air. You can find that at 1070thefan.com. Click on Indiana Outdoors. There you go. Or I just Google Indiana Outdoors Radio, and it usually gets me close. Nonetheless, we always appreciate those affiliates and, most importantly, you for listening to Indiana Outdoors. I always learn something. You hear me say it. I always learn something. I had no idea about this international event called the Big Sit. Not into big birding guy. Not a big birding guy. Like my birds, but boy, oh boy, there's a lot of people that really do make this their vocation and hobby. And no better place to do that than this event that's going to be taking place on October 13th. You heard Brad Feaster talking about it down at Goose Pond Fish and Wildlife area. And it's called the Big Sit. It's an international event held in conjunction with the Friends of Goose Pond. So if you're into that, just register, go to the calendar at DNR, and as Brad said, just come on down with some good folks. Man, I like that. I need some good folks. We need to hang out with good folks all the time. Nick Buja with the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, spending a lot of time here recently in the state of Indiana, spending time with our legislature talking about things like the ruffed grouse and listing that on the endangered species list. And, of course, Captain Jet Quillen with our law enforcement division. Boy, they're just always enjoy talking to our good friends in law enforcement. They've got a busy time of the year as a lot of folks flood into field and forest, and try to always be respectful. You know, get your permissions, have your licenses, do the right thing. And as we've been saying here for almost 20 years, remember to turn in a poacher. Take your phone with you, not only to figure out where you're going to take your deer for the free processing for the Hoosiers Feeding the Hungry after you've done yours, but also if you see something, report it. 1-800-TIP-IDNR. It's one of my passions to make sure people take that cell phone and just let the professionals handle it from there. And I do wish you, if you're out going somewhere this weekend, always safety. And we'd love for you to share some stories about how you loaded up your freezer, and maybe you took somebody new for the first time, somebody younger. I don't care. Just get them out in the great Indiana Outdoors where I'm going to be. Hopefully I'll see you outside somewhere this weekend. It is the Indiana Outdoor Show. I'll see you outside, everybody.